just before I get started, just the Fila on the tennis shoe box. Look, you're getting some product info on the top. Look, even the wrapping paper has got the outline of the shoe on it, you know? Giving you a little flair here. So like every other tennis shoe company, take notice, you know? We like this stuff. Let's get started. Hey everybody, it's Zach, Tennis Pro Doc, helping you improve your game with science. And today I finally got the Fila Axilus 2 Energized, and I'm really interested in this shoe, mainly because when you look at the top 30 ATP and WTA, when you look down the list, this shoe just keeps popping up over and over and over again. So I'm really excited to put these things through the gauntlet of test, and just to see why this shoe keeps popping up on so many pro players' feet. Here we go. Now right off the bat, when I look at the uppers, the one thing I notice is the uppers are very light material, that really light mesh, kind of spongy upper material. Now the tongue is actually pretty thin, and the shoelaces are actually pretty average. If I were you, if you buy this shoe, I probably would invest in some new shoelaces because these are a little bit flimsy. I think these could fray a little easy. Now, if you look, this shoe is basically all this just padded mesh, but it's caged entirely in rubber from the toe box, and it goes all the way up to the heel. Now, what I like about that is that the shoe retains stability from the toe box all the way into the heel because it wraps around the shoe, all that rubber. So you're not just getting stability in certain areas, you're actually getting it all around the shoe. And for a shoe that's all this padded mesh, you really do need that. And what's nice about this molded rubber compound is you are getting toe drag protection on the medial, central, and lateral sides of the shoe. But let's see how this rubber holds up. Dremel test, 10 seconds, highest grit sandpaper. As you can see, barely a scratch on this, not even a millimeter of damage. Now this is really good because, look, you're getting it all around the shoe. So that's actually really excellent on the Dremel test. Now, even though the uppers of the Axlilus 2 are really soft, they are not the most breathable uppers I've seen yet. These did rise almost 15 degrees from 69.4 to 84.5 degrees. All right, so moving into the midsole, you know, the Fila midsole foam on these is actually pretty stiff. It's some of the stiffest midsole foam I've tested recently. Now, also you get this plastic shank that goes all the way from the lateral side, central under the arch, and then up into the medial side. You know, however, with how stiff the midsole foam is, I'm not even sure how much this plastic shank is doing, but it is giving you just a little bit more of that arch support. And on the Teardown, I found a 2.6 centimeter heel height, 1.3 centimeter heel to toe drop. And one thing is I found that this plastic shank, it actually does span a lot of surface area. So it does come pretty far into the forefoot from the mid of the forefoot. So it actually is doing a little bit more than you think it's doing. However, the one thing I did find on the Teardown was how flimsy this heel counter is. I mean, this thing's just flopping around everywhere. You don't really appreciate that before it's torn down, but this really is pretty flimsy. The other thing I noticed on the Teardown is that stiff midsole foam goes all the way from the heel to the forefoot. So there's just not a lot of forgiveness in that midfoot, really from the heel all the way up to your toes. Now the outsole tread construction I actually really like. If you look here, you get a huge air channel going from the toes all the way to the shank. Now that's going to allow for a lot of efficient airflow as well as good sliding on hard courts. Now you also have these 3 break points here, one at the metatarsal phalangeal joint and then going up into the toes. That does allow the shoe to bend, that gives it a lot more give. Now that's also going to make the shoe a little bit more floppy and just a little bit more flimsy when you're moving, so you're not going to get that real stiff cantilever. Now also, when you just look at the herringbone, you know, you've got chunky herringbone on the lateral side, a little more flat herringbone on the medial side to grip a hard court, and then just a little more of the same in the heel. The one thing you have here though is this horizontal break point. This is for if you're a heel to toe striker. So let's say you're going all the way for a wide forehand and you got to sprint the other way, or you're more of a serve and volleyer and you're sprinting to the net. This just allows grip when you're coming down from that heel to toe strike. Now this is similar to how ASICS does that on the Solution Speeds and part of their shoes with the horizontal braking. However, I do like this a little bit better on here on the Filas because the heel is a little bit wider, and so you're just getting a little bit more stability, and they're actually using those horizontal break points a little bit more efficiently. Now the one thing I think Fila can improve on the treads here is on the lateral flange. Now the lateral flange is nice and sharp, it is nice and wide, so that is good. However, they do have this stamping right here, and I think if you just put the treads that go all the way up over here, you just get a little bit better grip. All right, but you know what I really want to know is how durable it is. All right, Dremel, 10 seconds, highest grit sandpaper. All right, and actually pretty nice, only about barely a millimeter of damage. I actually did this test twice just to make sure. That is actually really good. Good durability on this. Now, honestly, I think the best thing about these shoes is their fit. Now, the uppers are so soft when you go into them. I mean, there is no break-in whatsoever. They feel really good, almost like your favorite pair of bedroom slippers. Now, they are pretty wide in the forefoot. The flange is wide, like I said, so they do fit a wide foot pretty easily. Now, the thing that I was curious about is they got this whole molded rubber compound around the shoe. So in some shoes, that gets kind of annoying. Like, it just feels real clunky and kind of like there's sharp points. In these shoes, though, there really is none of that when you put them on. You really can't even feel that molding underneath of it. When you go in, all you feel is that padding. So as far as fit goes, I'd say if you are narrow, medium to wide, they are gonna fit you really well. Now, my 2E width foot fit my standard size really easily. If you do have a narrow foot, I still think you can go true, but I might wear 2 pairs of socks with these. That's kind of how I would compromise with that. You could try to go down a half size, but I think maybe try to the second pair of socks. That might fit just as well. I would just say if you have an excessively narrow foot, you might have some issues with heel slipping. So if you are really on the narrow side, maybe avoid it, go to something else just because of how generous it is in the midfoot. You might find yourself slipping just a little bit. You know, what's interesting is these shoes are on the lighter side. They're about 13.7 ounces, so they're right in that middle ground. However, they feel about half that weight. And that's just because the uppers, they're that kind of spongy mesh. They're really pillowy on the top. And then that rubber reinforcement, that cage on the top for the durability. On these, they've kind of found a way to make that really unobtrusive. So the shoe moves really nice, almost like you're on a cloud. So what's interesting is I am getting just a tiny bit of heel slippage. Now, unlike the Gel Resolution 8 where it's really noticeable, on these, it's just a slight little bit. And the heel counter is pretty snug, so I'm not getting a ton of movement there. However, if you have a ton of heel pain, or maybe you're just coming back from an Achilles injury, this might not be the best shoe because you are just getting that tiny little bit of motion. Other than that though, it's probably not gonna bother you. Now, what's interesting is the midsole is actually one of the more firm parts of the shoe. So moving around the court, I'm noticing the midsole is actually not giving all that much. It doesn't have a lot of forgiveness either. So whereas the uppers of these shoes are real pillowy, is that word again, you know, the midsole is just maybe just a little bit hard, a little bit stiff. So as you can see on that little pivot test, I'm running for a forehand. Because of the really soft uppers and that really hard, stiff midsole, I'm almost sliding along the midsole and the upper is a little soft. They're not really holding my foot. It's easy to deform the shoe on that. So as you can see, I slipped a little bit and it's kind of hard to get up. So for this one, that pivot test, the shoe isn't going to be as responsive when getting up and going for the next shot. Suicide test told a pretty interesting story, coming in at 14.57 seconds, which actually was a pretty good time because it was only 33, 34 degrees outside. My lungs were burning, my legs were a little stiff, but I still was able to come in at a good time, even as the shoes didn't turn as well and didn't make cuts as well. They're just so fast and so light otherwise, they still registered a pretty decent time. The serve test was not as kind to the Axlilus 2s, only coming in at 21 centimeters on the height test. And that's just because the midsole was pretty stiff, but not as bouncy or responsive. And the uppers are actually pretty soft, so they don't hold on to a lot of potential energy. Now the serve distance test, these did come in at 70 centimeters, which was better than some of the heavier shoes out there. The shoes are just lighter, so they can travel through the air a little bit better. So to come full circle, answer the question, why are so many top pros wearing these shoes? I think there are a couple answers to that question. Number one, you've got to realize most of the very top pros are having these shoes custom molded around their foot. So, when the shoe is molded exactly to your foot, it's going to be inherently more stable. So on those pivot turns and everything, the shoe is just going to perform a lot better because it's just molded exactly to your foot. So it's going to perform just like your foot does. It's almost an extension of your leg. Now, the next thing is the shoe does feel so light. I know it's 13.7 ounces, so it's not the lightest shoe out there, but it does feel really light. The durability in the uppers is definitely there. The durability on the treads is definitely there. I would say the one thing that concerns me is that midsole foam. I think maybe some of the top pros, and I don't know this for sure, but other shoe companies do this. I don't know why Fila wouldn't. But some of the top pros, they are getting different densities, different materials in that midsole made custom to them, what they like. So the shoes they're wearing might not exactly be the ones that are in the stock shoe. Now, if that stiff midsole is your really only hang up and buying these shoes. Remember, you can throw an over-the-counter or even better, a custom orthotic into there. Maybe just give you a little more support, a little more cushion under your foot, and that could make up for a lot of the characteristics of that stiff midsole, and that's probably another reason why a lot of touring pros will still use this shoe even with that stiff midsole. So it really leaves one more big elephant in the room, and that's this really soft upper segment here in the midfoot. You know, when I was really running hard and pivoting hard, this is really what was deforming easily. So if you're a touring pro and you're moving a lot faster and a lot more aggressively than I am, this is the one thing that I think I'd have a little bit of a concern about, is that when I really go to get up for the next shot, especially on clay, you know, are these going to keep deforming and keep going, or are they able to snap back and move the other direction? So that's the one thing that, you know, that's the one square I really can't circle in this playtest. All right, so if I had to describe these shoes in one word, yeah, you guessed it, it is pillowy. You know, these shoes are just like clouds on the uppers. They're so comfortable. The only bad part is the midsole is just so stiff. I think if you could find a way to just integrate a little bit more forgiveness in the midsole and maybe just a little bit more reinforcement along the midfoot right here going into the ankle, I think these shoes would be a lot more stable on those turns. I think they'd be a little bit more comfortable under my foot. All right, and since I've made you hear the word pillowy more than 3 times today, go over on Instagram, hashtag pillowy on any one of my photos. The first person to hashtag pillowy on any one of my photos on Instagram wins a free Tennis Pro Doc hoodie as my sign of apology. So I think the other huge thing is, and this has nothing to do with the pros, you can get these for $77 right now. So, you know, this is one of Fila's flagship shoes and you're getting it for well under $100. So for a lot of other flagship shoes, for a lot of other companies, you're paying well into the 120s, 130s. So, you know, for a flagship shoe at $77, it's hard to ignore that sometimes. I'd really like to know, what do you think about these? Do you think that stiff midsole is a deal breaker, that soft upper segment is a deal breaker? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your opinion. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great day, great night, wherever in the world you are tuning in from. See you next time.